And joining us now from New York is author and journalist Michael Moss. In 2009, he won the Pulitzer Prize for an article on beef safety. His latest book is called Sugar, Salt, Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us. Michael Moss, welcome to Lateline.
Thanks for having me.
So we're much better educated than we once were about the risks of salt, sugar and fat. So why are obesity, heart disease and diabetes still on the rise?
I think, I was really amazed in researching and writing this book, which was really like being inside a detective story for me. I was lucky to come across a trove of internal documents that really put you, the reader, at the table as companies are planning and plotting and formulating their way to new products. And that enabled me also to get their leading scientists and marketers to open up and reveal more of their secrets. And really, I have to point out that looking at all of that and talking to them, I don't view the processed food industry as this evil empire that's intentionally setting out to get us obese or otherwise ill. The problem lies in their collective zeal to do what companies do, which is make more money by selling more product. And they have on staff scientists and marketing experts who are just geniuses at optimizing, at perfecting the bliss point, as you mentioned, for sugar, the mouthfeel of fat, the flavor burst of salt in creating their products. And, on a day-to-day basis, when you're looking at obesity, a mere 100 or 150 calories can be enough to cumulatively make you obese. So it's the cumulative effect of the attraction of these most palatable products that seems to be at issue here.
This doesn't seem like anything new. What did you find remarkable in your 4 years of research inside these companies?
I spent time with one of the leading icons in the industry, Howard Moskowitz, for example, who walked me through his recent creation of a new soda flavor for Dr. Pepper. And to get at the optimum point of sweetness that would send us over the moon, he started with 61 different formulations of sweetness, each one slightly different than the other, subjected that to 3,000 taste tests and did the high math regression analysis to come up with the perfect amount of sweetness. And I was really stunned at how much science and what he calls sort of engineering goes into the formulation of foods. And it's not just that. When you talk to nutrition experts about sweetness in foods, it's the migration and spread of sweetness through the grocery store that concerns them, so that now bread is sweet and has bliss points engineered for us. Yogurts can have as much sugar as ice cream. Even pasta sauces can have the equivalent of a couple of Oreo cookies and a half of cup of pasta sauce. And it's teaching children especially to expect sweetness in everything they eat that concerns nutrition experts.
Now, your central premise in the book is that we simply can't resist these foods, but the fact is we can, can't we? And it's our responsibility to make the right choices about what we eat and how we shop.
Look, I'm really empathetic with the industry that doesn't want to use the A word, addiction. They prefer words like snackable and craveable and more-ishness. But the experts will say that for some of us, the sweetest, fattest foods will induce patterns of compulsive intake on the lines of some narcotics. And it's actually more difficult for those people to deal with food than it is narcotics, because you just can't go cold turkey. But I'm also hoping that the book, besides being a wake-up call to the industry, is also empowering to people, because there are some things you can do in the grocery store to find healthier items. For example, look low, look high on the shelf for those cereals, for example, that have less sugar, because the industry by strategy will place the highly sweet, the highly fat products at eye level in the center of the aisle. So if you're hunting for those healthier products, you're more apt to have to look down at the ground level or up high. But they are there with a little bit of effort.
You actually quote instances where company executives stopped eating their own foods. In what context did they admit that to you?
In the context of them having some substantial regret about the processed food industries and their own contribution to this developing and continuing obesity crisis in their own lives, especially when they ran into health problems. Often the very first thing they would cut out of their diet would be some of their companies and industries' own products, realizing that they were having trouble restricting their eating to one small individual serving. And sort of scientist after scientist sort of stunned me with their own shift toward healthier eating when it came to their own lives.
Now, your book actually opens with what you call a secret meeting back in 1999. The biggest food companies were all there to discuss the health risks associated with their products. Tell us the significance of that particular meeting.
It was this extraordinary meeting, and I came across it a few months into my research, and what was really extraordinary about it was that none other than one of their own, a senior executive at Kraft, stood up before them armed with 114 slides, laid at their feet not only responsibility for the obesity crisis, but diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. He even linked their products to several types of cancers, warned them that even if they didn't accept responsibility, the lawyers who went after big tobacco were inevitably going to come after them for the healthcare costs associated with obesity. And he pleaded with them to collectively start doing something to turn the corner on behalf of consumers. And the word collective is really key here, because individually these companies have trouble every time they try to cut back significantly on their dependence on salt, sugar, and fat. They run into revenue issues, taste issues. Wall Street is there demanding high profits. And it's a problem for these companies. They are between a rock and a hard place with their own dependency on salt, sugar, and fat.
They clearly ignored the suggestion from the Kraft executive. And what's interesting, of course, is that Kraft is now owned by Philip Morris, a big tobacco company. Do you really expect one day to see some kind of class action, perhaps by a group of people who are sick one way or another, who might take on one of the big food companies?
I think the food industry itself is really worried about that, and they're really worried about the soda industry getting hit first by that. I should mention that Philip Morris no longer owns Kraft. What was really fascinating, though, is that after that meeting, when the executives reacted defensively, it was a few years later when Philip Morris was pushing its food people to actually start dialing down on its dependence on salt, sugar, fat, warning them that they were going to run into trouble on those three ingredients and their dependency, much like big tobacco did on nicotine. So what's really revealing, I think, to me, is how Kraft on its own set out to take some initiatives to fight obesity. Some were successful, some ran into this problem, which is Wall Street and competitors were there waiting to, grab that part of the grocery aisle with their still highly sugary, salty, fatty foods.
Well, the food labelling, of course, has improved a lot, and ingredients are quite clearly spelt out, including the harmful additives. What more do you think food companies could be doing?
Kraft in its anti-obesity measures did a couple of things. One, it cut back on its advertising marketing to children of the most sweetest foods, realizing that kids are unable to distinguish between advertising and reality. Two, it started putting on its labels a fuller disclosure of how many calories, how much salt, sugar, fat was in the product, not just per serving, but for the whole package, because its data showed that for some of its snack foods, we were eating the whole bag and not limiting ourselves to just a tiny serving. And then they put caps on the amount of salt, sugar, and fat that their food scientists could use in formulating and optimizing the allure of their new products. I think those are really three extraordinary things that Kraft did and that the whole industry could embrace collectively now to really meaningfully make some changes.
Michael Moss, we're out of time. I really appreciate the time you have taken to speak to us today.
Thank you so much for having me.